So yeah, I know we got a lot going on today, but I know God gave me a word, so please stick around. If you have your Bibles, please turn to Acts chapter 17. Verse 1. Now, this is Paul's second mission trip. He's with Silas this time. And what happened was he was in prayer and he got a vision from a man from the region of Macedonia. And he was pleading with Paul, come, share the gospel to us. So he's like, well, that's where we're going next. So they head out to Macedonia. Now, Macedonia is just north of Greece. So that's where they're going. But they have to go through some parts of Greece before they get to Macedonia. And the first place they end up is Thessalonica, or Thessalonica. Am I pronouncing that right? Thessalonica? Sure. Now, brace yourselves because we're going to read the entire chapter, and there's a reason for that because there's a lot going on here. But I'll break it down. When he had passed through Amphipolis and Apollonia, they came to Thessalonica, where there was a Jewish synagogue. As his custom was, Paul went into the synagogue, and on 3 Sabbath days he reasoned with them from the Scriptures. So 3 weeks he was there, explaining and proving that the Christ had to suffer and rise from the dead. This Jesus I am proclaiming to you is the Christ, he said. Some of the Jews were persuaded and joined Paul and Silas, as did a large number of God-fearing Greeks and not a few prominent women. But the Jews were jealous, so they rounded up some bad characters from the marketplace. Now make note of that, because if he was preaching at the synagogue, for them to go get people from the marketplace, they weren't Jews. So they got a bunch of non-Jews, non-God-fearing Greeks, basically a bunch of non-believers, and joined forces with them against Paul. They formed a mob and started a riot in the city. They rushed to Jason's house in search of Paul and Silas in order to bring them out to the crowd. But when they did not find them, they dragged Jason and some other brothers before the city officials, shouting, "These men who have caused trouble all over the world have now come here, and Jason has welcomed them into his house. And they are all defying Caesar's decrees, saying that there is another king, one called Jesus." When they heard this, the crowd and the city officials were thrown into turmoil. Then they made Jason and the others post bond and let them go. As soon as it was night, the brothers sent Paul and Silas away to Berea. On arriving there, they went to the Jewish synagogue. Now the Bereans were of more noble character than the Thessalonians, for they received the message with great eagerness, and they examined the Scriptures every day to see if what Paul said was true. And Paul references the Bereans pretty often because he wants to make sure that we have sound doctrine, that we test everything we hear. It's measured against Scripture. So I don't want to get too much into depth with them because we know this, that when it comes to our doctrine, we need to test it out, just like the Bereans. And so they did, and many of the Jews believed, as did also a number of prominent Greek women and many Greek men. But then this happened. When the Jews in Thessalonica learned that Paul was preaching the word of God at Berea, they went there too, agitating the crowds and stirring them up. The brothers immediately sent Paul to the coast, but Silas and Timothy stayed at Berea. The men who escorted Paul brought him to Athens, and then left him with instructions for Silas and Timothy to join him as soon as possible. Now, this is important here. Paul was called to go where? Macedonia. Macedonia is north of Greece. Athens is in southern Greece. He was not intending to go to Athens. This was not on his trip. It wasn't on his itinerary. He was there because of circumstances. Now, while Paul was waiting for them in Athens, he was greatly distressed to see that the city was full of idols. So he reasoned in the synagogue with the Jews and the God-fearing Greeks, as well as in the marketplace day by day with those who happened to be there. A group of Epicurean and Stoic philosophers began to dispute with him. Some of them asked him, "What is this babbler trying to say?" Others remarked, "He seems to be advocating foreign gods." They said this because Paul was preaching the good news about Jesus and the resurrection. Then they took him and brought him to a meeting of the Areopagus, where they said to him, "May we know what this new teaching is that you are presenting? You are bringing some strange ideas to our ears, and we want to know what they mean." And in parentheses, I think when I read this, Luke, who was writing it, I picture him rolling his eyes as he says this. All the Athenians and the foreigners who lived there spent their time doing nothing but talking about and listening to the latest ideas. They just love to talk and discuss and debate philosophy. Paul then stood up in the meeting of the Areopagus and said, "Men of Athens, I see that in every way you are very religious. For as I walk around and looked carefully at your objects of worship, I even found an altar with this inscription, 'To an unknown God.' Now what you worship as something unknown, I am going to proclaim to you. The God who made the world and everything in it is the Lord of heaven and earth, and does not live in temples built by hands. And he is not served by human hands as if he needed anything, because he himself gives all men life and breath and everything else. From one man he made every nation of men, that they should inhabit the whole earth, and he determined the time set for them and the exact places where they should live. God did this so that men would seek him and perhaps reach out for him and find him, though he is not far from each one of us. For in him we live and move and have our being. As some of your own poets have said, we are his offspring. Therefore, since we are God's offspring, we should not think that the divine being is like gold or silver or stone, an image made by man's design or skill. In the past, God overlooked such ignorance, but now he commands all people everywhere to repent. For he has set a day when he will judge the world with justice by the man he has appointed. He has given proof of this to all men by raising him from the dead." And when they heard about the resurrection of the dead, some of them sneered. Especially, you got, I'll explain this more in depth later, but like the Epicureans did not believe in the afterlife. So this was a preposterous idea to them. So others said, "We want to hear you again on this subject." So there's those who sneered, and others who said, "Well, we want to keep listening. We want to hear more." At that, Paul left the council. A few men became followers of Paul and believed. Among them were Dionysius, a member of the Areopagus, also a woman named Damaris, and a number of others. Why am I talking about this chapter on our day about graduation? This is the word God gave me. Graduates, you are entering into a new Athens. Whether you're going to college or Christian or secular college, doesn't matter. Whether you're going to a mission field, workforce, military, the world you are entering is the most post-Christian it's ever been. Every facet of society that has biblical support is being dismantled before our very eyes. We can think of numerous examples. For me, and really what everyone here is going to have to deal with for sure, is when it comes to the issues of gender and sexuality. 10 years ago, when I was in college, I would tell people, this issue of homosexuality and gender identity issues, this is going to be the issue that makes or breaks the church this coming generation. Things that move so rapidly. It's like timetable has moved up. It's come sooner than I even anticipated. I mean, you could just look on your regular news feed. Just recently, the United Methodist Church just ordained a transgender person. It's in the church, there are constantly issues where churches are either going to stand by God's word or they're going to start compromising. You can't stay neutral any longer. So this issue is getting bigger. But not just in the church. Look around just our policies, or just up north in Canada, where we have, there's Bill C-16. I'm not sure if you guys have heard about this. I try to keep my ears to the ground. But this is a big deal in Canada where they have this law that if you refer to someone by the wrong pronouns, by the pronouns that they don't prefer to go by, because they are transgender, because they are non-binary, they don't believe in male or female, and they prefer to be called Z or Zer or some other made-up pronoun, you'll be guilty of hate speech, even if you didn't intend to offend them. It's not based on your intentions, it's based on the result. So if they got offended, no matter what you intended, they are allowed to condemn you of hate speech. So our very freedom of speech is at stake in Canada. Who knows if that's going to come here as well, but there's been a huge fight there. Then just recently, Ontario passed a law, Bill 89, where when it comes to considerations of domestic issues in the home or child placement services, stuff like that, they have to consider the child's gender identity and orientation and gender expression, which is really just fashion. So if your child, your own flesh and blood child, decides that they want to identify as the opposite sex, and you refuse to give them the treatment to do so, such as giving them hormone-blocking drugs, they can go to the state or the province, and they could get removed from your home because you'd be guilty of child abuse. How did we get here? This is the world you guys are entering into. Paul didn't want to go to Athens. He wasn't looking to go to Athens. We didn't ask for this world, but here we are. So how did we get here? How did this come? I like to study our culture. I like to study what happens, and you could trace it back. I mean, most of our attacks, and at least our modern history, have been on our sexuality. I mean, look, we talk about abortion. What is abortion than the result of denying the purpose of our genitals? That our genitals are meant for generating and reproducing. When we deny that reality, and we emphasize just the pleasure that comes from sex, that is really a side benefit, but it's amazing. But it's not the main purpose. Well, then we open the door to things like abortion, to more premarital sex, extramarital sex, and we end up with a score of issues. We could trace it back to continually denying the purpose and design of our bodies. That's how we've ended up where we are. So why am I talking about sexuality and gender? Because this is an issue, it's an attack on the very core of who we are as humans, as beings made in the image of God. We need to be prepared for this, to discuss it. It used to be that we could just take for granted the fact there's male and female. Now it's a controversial statement to say that a male has to have XY chromosomes. That's a controversial statement now. You're stirring up controversy to say that. That's bigoted. Now if you say if you're dating, man, you got to be careful who you're dating now. I thought that too growing up either way, because I didn't have a lot of parental supervision when the TV was on, so I used to watch some Jerry Springer, and I would see some of those episodes where it's like, that girlfriend you've been dating was actually a dude, and I'm like, oh man, that's it. I need to see birth certificates when I start dating. That is it. But I was seeing a video the other day where they're trying to claim if you prefer someone who's born as the sex that you think they are, then that's prejudice. Now, I'm not sure how popular that idea is going to get, but it might get there. So this generation, we need to be a voice of clarity and compassion. Now, I was reading Acts 17. The first thing God drew me to was the section of Athens. How we need to be ready to engage our culture. But what God revealed to me was we need to learn some lessons from Thessalonica and Berea before we can engage Athens. Before we can engage this increasingly secular world that's full of confusion, we need to go back. There's some lessons that we need to learn from those two previous cities that Paul went to prepare us for Athens. So in Thessalonica, we need to learn to not be like the Jews there. He was sharing the gospel and they were receiving it, but the others who were holding on to their traditions that weren't based on God's word, they're based on just their version of things, their philosophy, their traditions. They held on so tightly to those, they got jealous when people were converting. Their opposition to the gospel was worldly. It wasn't based on Scripture. It was based on traditions of man. We need to be willing to lay aside ideas, traditions, preferences that aren't based on God's word. We have to own our part of the problem. I work, as you guys know, with guys who deal with homosexuality, with sexual addiction, gender identity issues. It's not a popular field, but that's what I do. And I think about this right now. One of the guys I work with, he was raised in Philly, but he lives in Lancaster County. And so he's kind of fish out of water there because he's not white like all the other Lancastrians. But he was raised in the Mennonite community. And if you know anything about, especially the Mennonite community in Lancaster County, is very traditional, very old-fashioned, very rigid with their gender roles. And he shares with me this stuff, and he shared with me the guys he grew up with and his schoolroom and his classes, the guys he hangs out with. And consider this. This being generous, about 2 to 3% of the population is gay or exclusively homosexual in attraction. About 40% of the guys that he knows deal with same-sex attraction to some extent. Like, that is a disproportionate amount. Just way too much. But when you think about it, because he shares with me this stuff, they are keeping it in hiding. And it's a very culture that is so rigid with their views of what it means to be a man that actually breeds the very thing they're fighting against. When we're so strict that boys have to be into sports, you can't be into singing or music or opera. You have to be into this stuff. Boys have to dress this way all the time. That rigidness, when you reject someone because just their preferences are a little bit different, we're losing sight of what it really means to be a man. The sex differences are important, but sometimes we emphasize the wrong aspects of our sexual differences. Where it really matters is that only a man can be a father. Only a woman can be a mother. And now, because we've emphasized so much the other stuff, people are getting confused the difference between sex and gender. Because we emphasize gender roles so much that people feel like, well, if I don't fit that gender role, then I must be the opposite gender. No. We're confused because we've been so strict for so long, for generations. We need to be willing to discard things. All right, I know a guy. He writes poetry. All right? He loves to just hang out. He works with sheep. Kind of gentle. He plays the harp. Okay? Does this guy sound effeminate to you? Come on, be honest. Would you say, yeah, he's probably gay? Who am I talking about? King David, the manliest men. And he played a harp and wrote poetry. We need to be able to correct our view of what it means to be a man, what it means to be a woman. Because otherwise we're going to drive people away. And that's what happened to the Jews. They drove people away because of it. Because they were so strict. And then what happened? They went to the marketplace. They went to a bunch of non-believers. They went to people outside Judaism and joined forces with them to drive Paul out. What we learn from this, we need to be careful who we ally with. Be careful that the KKK isn't more comfortable with you than a black person in your presence. Or someone who just constantly says hateful things about people of same-sex attraction. Are they more comfortable around you than someone who actually has same-sex attraction? Like, be careful who you ally yourself. Who would feel most comfortable around you? Who would you feel more comfortable around? You got to check yourself there. That we're not joining forces with the wrong type of people. Because it might work for a moment, but if we stay allied with them after the battle's over, it's going to look bad. Berea. When he got to Berea, we need to learn to study and test every teaching. And not just theology like Pastor talks about, but like I was saying before, our traditions, our norms. I need to test them. And we need to challenge the world that is teaching us stuff all the time. You know, right now, I'm looking for textbooks because in the fall, I will be teaching at Valley Forge, Intro to Psych. And if you try to find any Intro to Psych textbook, it's a propaganda. That's really all it is. You can't find anything that's objective. And the newer editions are just getting worse and worse, where I read it where the author is giving his new forward. It's like, oh, I make sure that I include everything on diversity, and on my chapter about sexuality, I make sure to tell them that asexuality and homosexuality are all just normal variants. It's like, that's a philosophical statement. That's not scientifically based. So it's become more where as long as enough people agree on it, then we can accept it as true unchallenged. So we need to be willing to challenge everything we hear within the church, outside the church, and study. We can't afford to be ignorant going into Athens. We need to be familiar with what they're teaching there. we need to be able to know what we believe and why, to really explain it. I get into a lot of, if anyone's a Facebook friend of mine or follows me, I don't know if you get the notifications, Andrew commented on another post. You'll see I get into a lot of discussions on the Christian Post or Charisma or whatever the case is, and especially Christian Post. They're like a group of these atheists who are always on there. They just, and as soon as there's anything about sexuality on there, they got to jump down everyone's throat and attack everyone for their beliefs. And so I engage with them, and it's exhilarating. But I do it not just to try to win them over, but to win over anyone else who might be reading the same post, but also to test my arguments out, to make sure that I'm not leaving anything in the blind spot, that I'm aware of every argument they have, and to really brush up my studying. We have to stay sharp. And especially now with the government, some changes with more conservative leaders, we can't get complacent. It's easy to be like, well, good, now we got some people on our side in leadership. Don't get complacent, because you don't even know how long that will last. Now is the time to increase our efforts to explain what it is we believe and why it's important. And continue to fight for our rights to be able to share what we live by, share what we believe and live by our beliefs. When we do those two things, when we take the lesson from the Thessalonians and take the lesson from the Bereans, now we're ready to enter Athens. Now, some interesting things about Athens, if you really do some study, Athens was like a giant liberal arts college. The houses, like literally, if you study it, the houses were more like dorms. Men didn't even spend most of their waking hours there. They're either after work, they're out in the marketplace, they're discussing philosophy with people. They slept at their houses. That's about it. They ate outside in the public square. It was a big dorm room. You had philosophers everywhere. It was like no borders, so foreigners were allowed there. They had idols everywhere. Now, Athens, it got named from Athena, the goddess of wisdom. So it makes sense that they would try to pursue wisdom, philosophy, to try to understand their world in their own terms. Philosophy is basically theology without God included, where you're trying to understand everything without thinking of God in there. And on top of it, they had idols everywhere. So you had a very interesting mix where you had people from everywhere. They were doing philosophy, and then they had idols. So they still had a knowledge of God or gods. And what that shows is they were seeking truth any way they could find it. And that's how it is when you go to college. Whether you're going to a Christian college or a secular one, people are trying to understand the world. Now, Paul was accustomed to speaking in synagogues. And when he does that, he's mostly only speaking to fellow believers or Jews or God-fearing Greeks. But when he got to Athens, he saw just the city itself and saw all the gods there, everything everyone else was worshiping, and he was disturbed, greatly distressed by it. Now look at, what does modern day idolatry look like? It is, and pretty much it always has been, worship of the creation, which is worship of self. When we believe we are God, and we put ourselves first, no matter how that looks. Just look at, say, Facebook, for example. If you open up an account, you can have over 50 plus gender options to choose from. And if that's not enough for you, you have a customized button where you can type in your own version of your gender. So it's inherent in that idea that we are our own gods, that we can say what we are. The whole pronoun issue, the made-up pronouns, that's that same idea. Who knows what the future may bring? Maybe in the future we'll have cloning, so that I don't want to be a male anymore. I'm going to clone a body, and I'm going to make sure it has different chromosomes. And then I'll transfer my consciousness to that. Who knows where advances are going to take us when we don't have any truth to sort of hem us in. Now, as greatly as Paul was distressed by what he saw around him, by all the idolatry, he didn't go on a tirade. He didn't go to all the Athenians and say, you bunch of heathens, you perverted, sick heathens, you need to repent, you're all going to hell. He didn't do that. I mean, think about it too, all the different types of idols, the way you worship them weren't all the same. It wasn't just here you give the idol some food. Some of it involved different acts, sacrifices, maybe sexual acts. So he's looking at a society that's full of sin. But he looked through the sin and he saw what they were really searching for. And he said to them, I see that you are very religious. How many of you, when you look at someone who's in sin, who is chasing after sex in a different way, or just other types of sin in general, see that they're actually very religious? That they're actually hungering for truth. They're trying to find it. They're trying to experience something real. He was able to identify that and pierce through it. If we want to effectively engage the culture, we need to figure out what it is they're searching for. And then show them how the gospel provides that better than anything else. This past school year, we were going over how to evangelize, how to share the gospel. And then we went over what are the blessings of the gospel. Upon salvation, what is true at that very moment? I'll give $5 to any of the youth here who can tell me what those 5 things are. Any takers? We must have went over this 100 times. So we go over things like we're forgiven, that we're reconciled, that we're reborn, that we're justified, and we're given honor. People are hungry at their deepest levels for those things. They need to know that they're forgiven. They need to know that they can be someone new. They don't have to keep making the same mistakes over and over, that they're accepted. They need to know these things. We need to show them that the gospel has a solution for what they're looking for. And it's true immediately. Upon salvation, those are things that are true. The rest of life is figuring out how that is applied. So Paul knew how to communicate this, figure out what they're searching for. They're searching for truth. And he knew how to explain it in their own terminology. So we can't engage the world in our own Christianese. How many know that video, Why I Hate Religion But Love Jesus? Have you seen this on YouTube? It's like a spoken word. He's like rapping with that music, sort of, like, and just sharing how Jesus isn't a Republican or anything, and how we don't need rituals and stuff like this, and Jesus is about relationship. Like, we say this all the time. I can't stand that video. Because we get it. We understand what we're saying when we say Christianity is a relationship, not a religion. But to non-believers, that just sounds like gibberish. It's semantics that just don't make no sense. So we need to make sense to the world that we're engaging. And Paul was able to do that. He understood where the Epicureans and the Stoic philosophers were coming from. So he could communicate things. Even if he wasn't like changing the gospel, he just was able to communicate in a way that they could grasp. So let's take a look real quick at the philosophers he engaged with. And how does that relate to today? And what is the truth that we can offer them? So the Stoics, they believed in the logos, which is the logic, the divine logic that operates the world that we live in. The way that the Creator created things, there's a logic behind it. Well, we know who that logos is. We know that the logos is the Word. The Word was with God. The Word was God. The Word became flesh. We know that our God didn't create things haphazardly, that He created us with a purpose, with a reason. When it comes to this gender issue that's going on, we know that God had a reason why He made us male and female. Let's look at the word gender, just in general, real quick. It comes from the Latin genus, which means birth or origin. And then the Greek, gen, which means to produce. So we see gender is determined by the manner by which you generate. You don't have male or female without the fact that they are meant to generate somehow. So the way in which you generate the next generation that determines their gender. This should be a basic fact that But now we have to explain it to people because we take words and we change their meaning. Now people say, gender is just the way you feel about yourself. No, it's not. That might be gender identity, but it doesn't mean your gender identity is valid. So we need to understand what they're thinking and bring it back to, okay, here's what it actually means. We need to explain that there's a design, there's an order to things. Do it calmly, do it rationally, but we need to bring clarity. Why did God design us to reproduce some way? Why couldn't he just make us asexual, we just reproduce individually? He could have done that. There are some animals that do that, not many. So yeah, he could have, but no, he made us sexual beings for a reason. And that is why this gender's been attacked from the beginning. It's the very first command God gave us, to be fruitful and multiply. Ever since then, it's been an attack on that first command. But why? And Paul says it reveals a great mystery about Christ and the church. So if you've been checking out on me like, why is he talking about sex and gender right now? Because this is a message for everyone to understand that our purpose is to be Christ's bride. God himself, he's not a sexual being, but he presents himself as one of the genders, male. Why male? Why couldn't he be female, we be male? Because the male is the one that gives the seed. The woman is the one who receives it to give birth to life. God is one. He's the originator of life. He's the one that gives and we receive. That's why he is Father. That's why he is the bridegroom. We're the bride. This is a profound truth that we need to understand, just as believers. But it's also a truth that when we understand this, we can figure out ways to communicate it to the rest of our culture. It's not a haphazard that he didn't just do it to appease a male-dominated society. Well, because the rest of the culture is patriarchal, I'm going to present as a male. No, he had a reason why he presents as male, because he is the originator. We're the recipients of the life he gives us. So that's our response, so we can figure out how to deliver to the Stoics, the people who want to figure things out rationally. The Epicureans that believed in pleasure. Today, that would be anyone who just says, whatever feels good, do it. Every pleasure is just a taste of the pleasure we're going to experience, the ecstasy we're going to experience with Christ in the wedding feast in heaven. Everything else, it's just a sample. That's why there's so much addiction. Is when you take this hunger for something eternal and you direct it to something of this world, this temporary life. When you try to take a hunger for something that can only be satisfied by God, and you direct it toward yourself, toward things of this world, it's never going to satisfy you. It just makes you crave more and more. This is what I deal with when I'm working with guys with sexual addiction or any addiction. They're just craving something. They need to know that the answer really is going to be fulfilled by him. So we have the answer for those who are just confused about the design of their bodies, the design of this world, and the answer for those who are just caught in addiction. They're just craving something deeper and deeper, more satisfying. They're never going to be fully satisfied. I had to come to a realization of this. Last week, my wife and I just celebrated our 10-year anniversary. Yeah. I love my wife. And if anyone knows me, they know I'm crazy about her, okay? And it has been 10 amazing years. We have a great marriage. And so sometimes I get a little sad when I think about heaven, because I know Jesus said in heaven there will be no marriage. And I was like, but I kind of like being married. I really like her. And I don't want to lose that. But when I came to realize that the purpose of marriage is only meant to be a reflection, it's supposed to be a foreshadow of what's going to come later, the ultimate marriage, that gave me the peace I needed. And also the peace I needed when there's times we're going through a little fight, or I don't get to be with her for a little while. That gives me that satisfaction, that peace, knowing that this is only meant to be a taste of what's to come. The satisfaction I get in our amazing marriage, it pales in comparison to what I'm going to experience with Jesus in heaven. That gives us hope. It gives hope when you're that single person who's struggling, and everyone in this world is married, and you're like the only one left out. When you realize that this world is just a blip, you get to spend eternity with him, and that's going to be way better than anything on this life. As awesome as marriage is, and as much as it is still God's will for us to marry when we have someone, God has a solution for those who cannot marry, and it's to devote ourselves to him, because, boy, that's like some really good premarital counseling right there, I guess, if you get to be with him even longer before marriage in heaven. So we have a message of hope for people. That the pleasures of this world, yeah, they're awesome. Yeah, they feel good. But we know they don't satisfy, at least not for long. That's why Jesus told the woman at the well, I give you living water. You'll never thirst again when you have my water. This is what we need to bring to this world.